Behold, your next contender comes to you from the farthest reaches of an unknown galaxy.
Oh boy, my first cage fight.
Oh, never mind. Oh, never mind. Our next contender...
This is the sound of audio and animation. It's not often noticed, but where it's missing, it might be sorely missed. Like the craft of animation itself, sound design and animation must be created completely from scratch. And, as with animators, no two sound designers think exactly alike. I sat down with Emmy Award winner Dane Dickmann to talk a little bit about the often underrated aspect of audio animation. The first question I wanted to ask you, you do audio mixing and you do sound design, but to someone who maybe doesn't know those terms, what's the difference?
I guess audio mixing would be taking the elements at hand, whether that's dialogue, music, sound effects, or whatever, and mixing them, blending them together to make a polished end product sound good. I always say that, like, if nobody notices the sound, then I've done my job. Sound design, they kind of go hand in hand, but sound design is probably, in my opinion, more based around taking a scene in a movie or an animation or something and creating the environment, adding the sound effects that, a car door shutting, footsteps walking down a hallway. If it's a action movie, the explosions or somebody getting punched in the face, in movies when people get hit in the face or kicked or punched or bodies falling on the ground, that doesn't sound like that in real life. So, the sound design element, I think, is more like creating the environment, and whether that's if somebody's outside, there's birds chirping, dog bark in the far distance. If a car goes flying by in the screen, if it moves from the right to the left, it's taking the visuals and making the sound from the speakers go right to the left. So, like, that wasn't recorded on set. It may have been, but the sound design element is kind of more like adding in what should be there. Versus mixing is taking all those elements and mixing them and blending them to be at the right levels.
I wouldn't have thought about sound design as entailing even just the audio experience in terms of panning from one speaker to the other. That's interesting.
Well, yeah, and I guess another element that people would probably bring on for sound design is, like, somebody took a contact mic, which is something you can put on a surface that potentially vibrates, like, say, a big long metal cable, and you hit it and it'll record that sound, and it's very interesting. So there's that aspect of sound design too, which is taking different elements and instruments and things and creating new sounds, like Star Wars or something, like the sounds of the lightsabers and stuff. Like, those were created sounds. Like, somebody took instruments and objects and created those sounds. So sound design kind of covers everything, to where mixing, in my opinion, is more taking what you already have and just balancing the levels and making it an enjoyable experience audibly.
I do think one of the things that's kind of unique to audio in film is that there's a production element and there's a post-production element. So specifically, like in animation, the production element would be, getting actors in the sound booth, recording them. And then post-production would be sound designing, mixing, and everything.
Right.
Do you have a particular leaning in terms of which you prefer to do? And if so, what kind of pulls you in that direction?
I think there's elements of both that I enjoy. I enjoy the pre-production aspect of things, working with producers or writers or directors and kind of feeling out where they're going and getting in their mindset, of where they want the voice talent to go. That's just fun, just working with people. And then the post-production side, like, a lot of times I may get notes from directors or animators or whoever kind of has the bigger picture of things, kind of hearing what they want. But then when it comes to, like, the post-production side, I kind of just go and do my thing. So there's elements of both sides that I think are are a lot of fun. And quite frankly, I mean, I love what I do. So if I'm doing either, it's a good day.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I found you pretty helpful in the recording booth when we were working together, on Safety Squad and having people come in. I found that you were able to kind of help me as a first-time director to kind of help, even just kind of gauge takes that we were doing and that sort of thing. So I thought that was helpful.
Stop before someone gets hurt. Who are you guys?
#busted. The Safety Squad again.
That's right, bad idea, Bandit. It seems Bandit here has steered you in the wrong direction when it comes to street safety. For starters, always wear a helmet when you're riding a bike, a scooter, or anything else with wheels. It's the only thing protecting your head in case of an accident, and it will save.
Yeah. I mean, when you work with talent, VO talent and stuff, and then directors, as long as I have, you just kind of, get an understanding of where they're wanting to go. So, sometimes I don't chime in at all. It just depends on who I'm working with. I love working with you. So it's very easy to kind of I see where you're going with this, and then we kind of bounce back and forth. We're like, yeah, that works. And that's what's fun about in the steps before post-production is working with other creatives and seeing where they want to go and helping them get to that point. And then you also learn a lot about yourself and your skills along the way.
I was pretty surprised to learn. So one, I think sound can make or break a movie. And I was surprised to learn that depending on the medium, the delivery, the avenue where whatever this animation is going to be viewed, it gets different mixing levels. So for instance, something that's going on TV is going to have a different mixing level than something that's going to go on YouTube, or that's something that's going to play in the movie theater. Can you talk to maybe what's going on there, why that is, why you can't just sort of level everything out the same, why you do things differently?
For broadcast, for TV stuff, a while back, commercials were so much louder than whatever program was being played. So the FCC put in an act where, then the average loudness of an entire program, whether that's a commercial, a movie, a TV show, whatever, has to be a certain level. Movies are different. Movies, if you go to a movie theater, you have to have your peak levels, which just to make sure things aren't clipping and distorting and whatever. But, the dialogue could be as quiet as you want it. And then for web, I know like YouTube and like Spotify and some of the other platforms, they kind of have their specs, but typically from the people that I've worked with and stuff, we just kind of make everything as loud as possible for the web, and I think the reason they do that is because if one commercial is super loud and then the next content that you watch is super quiet, you're constantly having to turn your phone up and turn your phone down. You're constantly having to adjust it. So everybody's just like, well, just make it as loud as possible. And it's kind of the same thing with TV, when back in the day, commercials would come on and people would be like, oh, they have to turn it down. And then their TV show would come back on and they got to turn it back up. So they were like, all right, well, then everything just has to be in this range or whatever.
Now, kind of in your work and in your career, you've had various kinds of projects, various kinds of clients. I'm kind of curious when it comes to sound design, is animation, is it different? Or is it very much the same as mixing or designing for, say, a reality show?
There's elements that are the same, but with animation, in my opinion, I think it's definitely more involved, because if you look at the very start of animation from an audio standpoint, all you have is dialogue. That's it. That's all that's recorded. If you're working on a reality TV show, there's the dialogue, obviously, but those microphones are picking up environmental sounds and whatever. So a lot of that stuff you end up being able to use in the mixing or sound designing aspect of things. With animation, you're starting from ground zero. You have nothing but the dialogue. So if there's a character that's in an elevator, you got to make it sound like it's in an elevator. I think there's more involved with animation for sure, because you're just having to create everything from nothing.
So when you're mixing and when you're designing for sound, you've worked with composers. I know Brent, you guys have worked on projects together, but then there are projects where you just, for various projects call for using music from libraries, music libraries. So I'm curious, when you're working with a composer, how does that look for you, and how do you guys do that?
When I've worked with Brent and the few other composers that I've worked with, usually like the director and the composer they're doing their thing, and then like I'm doing my thing. So I'm doing all the sound design. I'm adding all the sound effects and mixing the dialogue and whatever. And the composer is kind of doing his thing. I may receive multiple versions of the music that the composer's doing based on him and the director's conversation. Maybe the composers come to me and being like, hey, I kind of want a little bit more of this sound in the music that I gave you. Like, can we turn that up a little bit or something? But usually the stuff that I've done with composers, it's kind of like they're doing their thing and I'm doing my thing. And then at the end, I kind of put it all together.
I know in animation, and I think you and I have worked this way a couple of times, but I think we've worked in the opposite way too. So in animation, it's very common for the editor who's putting together an animatic before things get into animation to use temp music. I pulled music from this movie. I think it's a great tone. I'm going to put it in here.
Right.
And then you, as a sound designer, let's say you're pulling music from the library, you get to you hear that. Is it more interesting for you to get to sort of watch the animatic without music and get to kind of pull selects and pick things, or yourself, or is it, or do you prefer to have the director sort of say, or the editor, say, here's temp music, here's the cue in, cue out, and go from there?
I think it depends. I enjoy both ways. Obviously, me being the sound designer, like I'm not the director. So if the director has something specific they want, or something specific they have in mind, like a tone or a feel or a genre, then I'm just going to take what they tempt in and find something similar. I think we've worked this way together. Like maybe you've put stuff in, but then I'm like, hey man, what do you think about this? And I'll kind of like, I'll like what you did, but like, I'll mute the music and just watch it. And I'm like, this could be cool. And it may be something that the director thought of and was like, no, that's not the direction. Or they may have not thought that. I think that's where the collaboration comes in, which is again, an awesome part of this industry. And then the other times where they just give me something with 0 temp tracks, like it's fun. It can be frustrating because at first for me, like I'm not a composer, so I'm like picking things from libraries. Obviously I want it to sound cohesive, like it all came from the same place. It can be frustrating at first because it's like, what you want, but you're finding things, but it's not quite working. But then all of a sudden it just starts working, and then it just molds. And then all of a sudden it's like, this thing was like custom scored. It's like, no, it was just bits and pieces of this song and that song and that song to like make it work.
What is it this time?
It doesn't look good. Street safety risk in progress.
During rush hour in St. Louis? Oh man, this is bad. The bad idea bandit, no doubt. And I've got my Zumba class tonight. Well, Zumba will have to wait.
I know we did that with the safety squad stuff. I think you just kind of gave me the animation and were like, here you go, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll find some music and just put it together. The hard thing about that is like, if you're not a composer and the animation is locked, like finding things to hit at the right time and stuff can be difficult, because if the beat of the song doesn't work, if it doesn't hit at that perfect spot, then that can be a challenge. I guess at that point you just go and try to find something else. But I like working both ways. I think if somebody gives me something like, we want something like this, that's fine. And then a lot of times directors or whatever, they'll give me a locked picture with the cut of music that they found prior to coming to post audio, and the editor, they all worked together and made the edit based on that song. And then I just do the mixing part at that point and just polish it and make it, make the levels nice and
Yeah, yeah, I think we did. I think the first episode of Safety Squad, I might have given you some temp stuff, and then I
Yeah.
think by the end, I think I just stopped. I think you just
Yeah,
your
we had
instincts
done
were so spot on that it was like, fake music that's not going to stick around.
but I get, the temp stuff I totally get because it helps the edit feel more, like it helps you as the editor or the animator. Like I would imagine that it helps you kind of feel if what you're doing is working.
Yeah,
Like for me, like if if somebody were like, hey, sound design, we want sound design for this, but you get no picture. I'd be like, what? Like, which I have done, which is weird, but yeah, it was really weird, but it worked. And they put picture to what I did. But I would imagine as an editor or an animator, like putting temp stuff in kind of helps you feel out what you're doing.
yeah, it does. It does. It certainly helps to gauge. Okay, is this working? Is this not?
Yeah.
But then you just take it out before I give it to you, and like, here it is, no music.
Yeah, or you keep it in and you're like, hey, we either A, we love this track, use it, or B, we like this, but it's not quite working, do your thing and find something similar, or, whatever. And then there's those other times where, I may think, hey, I think this would be cool. And then that's when we collaborate. And I think we did something like that with that, the Walt Disney thing. I remember you sent me something with that. What was that? Like it wasn't a trailer per se. It was like it
was like a concept trailer.
Yeah. And then I was like, hey, what about a bunch of this kind of music? And you were like, it's awesome. Like, and then it kind of morphed into whatever it is now. And we work in a creative industry, man. Like there's no one way to do things. It's this industry is like, you're constantly working with people. Things are constantly back and forth all the time.
That's true. I find that increasingly true. Even studio to studio, the way people get the same things done varies, and it's like at the end of the day, the end product is the same. So who cares how you did it? I've heard it said that the editor of a project is sort of the last storyteller. They'll take all the pieces that have been filmed or made or whatever. In animation, it's a little bit different. All the editing happens up front. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if that's entirely true, just because I think there is still the audio pass, particularly in animation. Is there a bit of a storytelling element where you might find you need to help the visuals in the way you design sound?
Yeah, I mean that is sound design, and that's sound design. Take the project we did for Make-A-Wish a few years back. Kid with Make-A-Wish, his wish was to make a superhero movie, and we both know what this is, but this I'm explaining this for people who don't know what this is. His wish was to help write and star in a Star Wars-esque action movie. God, it was hundreds of people, right, that like were involved with this. I mean, they built a whole set, and it was incredible. The amount of effort that went into this thing was unbelievable. He's in a spaceship, or he presses a button and spaceship things come out of a table or whatever. I'm going to put some sound to that. I'm going to put some glitchy, computery, scientific-y type of sound to that to kind of just bring that to life. There's a scene in there where they fight with swords that are supposed to replicate lightsabers. We were, we're not allowed to use. We weren't even allowed to say lightsabers in the movie, I guess, for copyright reasons. So again, I have to create that sound to enhance. If they're fighting and the swords hit each other, like I got to make it sound, like electricity sparks and the whooshes and the whooms of the swords flying through the air. That helps bring the storytelling to life. The impact of it kind of envelops you and sucks you in and makes it feel like you're there.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And, I think even sometimes it can make things just a little bit clearer. Like in one shot, I'm standing here and there's nothing. In the next shot, there's suddenly this interface, this graphic interface. And I suppose the storytelling element, sound design would be to hear that, booting up or whatever.
Tyler, how's the center looking?
It's all prepped and ready for you. just needs a baby tiger.
Well, I've got a baby tiger for you. Let's rescue an animal.
Right. Well, and then even, if you want to go to the emotional side of sound design and storytelling, you can go that route too, even though that's more, I would put more of that towards like music elements, to get the emotion of the storytelling with the music. I mean, I don't want to get graphic, but like, if somebody gets stabbed with a knife or something, you're going to hear some squishy, gutsy, kind of gross sounds. There's storytelling, I mean, if you don't hear that, then it's there's less of an emotional impact that action is going to provide to the viewer. So, yeah, I mean, the storytelling with sound design is, I mean, that's just one aspect. I mean, I've done books on tape where, the writer, either they come in and read the book and it's a book on tape, or they may hire an actor or whatever. We did a children's book years ago. And it was one of the last projects I worked on at that studio before I moved to St. Louis. And we sound designed like the entire book, just to bring audibly the listener to the place that the story is talking about. It all has to be molded to be one thing, which is the viewer is not taken out of their experience. Sound design is storytelling from an audio standpoint.
Yeah, that makes me think of, there was an Ed Versus we did. I remember now there was an elevator that was closing and someone was supposed to shuffle on up and try to get there before they got there. And the guy, Ed, in the video says, you kind of hear some footsteps coming, only you don't in real life. And I remember that was something you had to add in.
Yeah.
Help that story play out. Like, okay, here they come.
Yeah, it's the same. Like you use sound design to say, hey, this is happening over here, but it's not on picture.
The last thing I wanted to ask has to do with animation. Traditionally, historically, has used what's called Foley Sound, which is where you just record physical objects in a microphone. These days, we have digital libraries where you can look up sound effects and just sort of plop them in. Do you ever dabble in Foley? Are you interested in Foley? Have you done much in Foley?
I've done a little bit. I think the art of it is awesome. You see those big, huge Foley stages every now and then that they'll show. If you're watching a video of like a behind the scenes thing or something, they'll have huge soundstage just for Foley. I mean, they just have toys everywhere. And I remember when I was a kid, like kind of getting into audio and learning what people would use for different sounds and stuff. Like they would use like celery to like for bone breaking and stuff. Like if somebody like breaks their arm, they would just crunch a piece of celery. Or I know for like action movies where people are getting punched in the face or something, I've seen where they'll take like cornflakes and sprinkle them over like a big slab of meat and take a baseball bat. I haven't done a lot of it, or I haven't really researched a lot of it, but what I have seen and read and watched or whatever, it's cool, the stuff that people do to like come up with these sounds. The work that I do commercially and, for TV shows and stuff like that, typically I'm just using library stuff. I'd say like probably 99% of the time I'm just using library stuff because there's so much out there nowadays. Like for instance, I have I have thousands of sound effects and stuff in my library. And then I have a program that will search the metadata. You name it. I can type that in and it'll search that sound effects library and populate my window with a ton of sound effects. And then I just kind of go through and pick what I think works or what visually works for the scene and whatever. I'm not a Foley artist. I'm not a location recorder. So, my environment, like I may have something that I want to record, but my environment may not be right. And a lot of times I'll layer different, multiple sound effects to create whatever I'm trying to create on the screen. The only time that I'll do Foley is if it's a situation where like it's very specific. Like I have two scenarios that I've done Foley that I remember. One was it was an agriculture video for Monsanto or Bayer or whatever it was at the time. And there was a farmer and there was lots of pretty B-roll shots and he's walking the fields and blah blah blah, and he like picked up some corn and kind of like dropped it in his hand. and we wanted a little sound of that. It's like, well, what do you type in, your sound effects search in? What do you type in for that? Like seeds dropping into hand. I mean, like, that's like one of those really specific moments where it's like, that's going to take forever to find something like that, because that's very specific. If you want a coffee maker, a toilet flush, a car door, like that's easy. You can type that in. So what I ended up doing was at the studio I was working at, we had a bunch of candy everywhere all the time for clients and whatever. And I went down and grabbed a handful of Skittles. And, and I went into my VO booth and I was watching the screen, and I kind of just dropped the Skittles into my hand with my microphone right here. Did it a couple times, and then, I had to treat it a little bit. I had to make it sound a little, Skittles are a little heavier than, pieces of corn and whatnot. So, but with a little mixing and whatever, like it ended up sounding like what I'm seeing on screen, corn being dropped into your hand. That was a Foley instance where it's like, I'm just going to do this because it's going to be quicker and easier and whatever. The other one was for a Schnucks commercial that we were doing. Basically the concept was there's a glass of milk, and it's like the milk is the magnet for different items from Schnucks. So like you have a glass of milk and an Oreo or a cookie, something comes flying in and sticks to the glass. And then a couple other things do, but at the very end, like the whole bag of cookies comes and hits the glass and then stands upright, and that's the end of the commercial. I was kind of having problems finding the sound of that particular crunchy sound of the cookie packaging. I had a bag of chips on my desk, and I was like, well, you know what? So I went into the booth and I just watched the thing on screen, hit play, and I took the bag and hit it and made, just did some stuff. And that worked way better than trying to just search for that specific sound. So I guess for Foley, it's typically more of like, if I know, or if I'm having problems finding a very specific sound that I'm looking for, then I'll Foley it. But 99% of the time, like I have it in my library somewhere, whether that's a particular sound or taking multiple sounds and kind of layering them to get the sound that I'm going for.
That makes sense. Dane, thanks for this interview, man. I've enjoyed it. Yeah. Appreciated everything. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing. So thanks, man.
Yeah, man. It was awesome catching up again.